Theologizing starts early for some of us, especially I've discovered if we're raised in Oklahoma. Here's a story from one of the moms in our congregation. David, my 8-year-old, she said, came home from school and asked me, "What is hell?" So I told him, to the best of my understanding, hell is what some religious people consider the place God created for people who did not lead lives that he or they considered to be good. It's supposed to be a terrible place full of fire and eternal suffering, the ultimate punishment. Watching his face transform into a look of fascination and horror, I asked him, "Why are you asking?" He explained that a classmate on the playground told him that he was going to go there. Incredulous, I asked him for more details. He told me that he and his friend were discussing the Bible. David admitted that he didn't read it at home. He admitted that he had heard of it, but he didn't read it because he wasn't sure God even wrote it. And quite frankly, he wasn't sure he believed in God at all. This is his mother speaking, I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me was horrified that a child would use the worst place they'd ever heard about to threaten my son. The child obviously believed in what he was saying, so the fact that he could wish such evil upon my son really did shock me. I was also sad, because my best response in that moment was to tell David to keep his opinions about religion and God to himself, because we don't want to offend anyone or alienate ourselves here in Oklahoma. Theologizing starts early for some of us, especially if we're raised here in Oklahoma. It also silences us. The stakes are that high. Our friendships and families are threatened by ideas about who is good and who is bad. The stakes are very, very high. Because if or when we lose our own sense of being good, of being essentially good, it's hard to find and feel that again. And at some point, most of us discover that we're capable of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we spend the rest of our lives trying to recover the sense of being okay, or even better yet, beloved. The stakes are clear in a cartoon I want to describe to you called The First Few Minutes of Heaven. In this drawing, there's a huge crowd of people, so many that they're all pressed up against each other, they're all going in the same direction, but you can't really see where. There aren't any angels or harps in view, yet they're checking each other out, and at the same time, they're trying to act like they're not checking each other out. But we can read their thoughts. You're here? Where the hell am I? Are you sure you're in the right place? What are you doing here? I think you must have had your map upside down. You made it? And you? It's easy enough to say we all share the same source, that we're Unitarians, that we come from one God or one Big Bang, which was a long, long, long time ago. And it's easy enough to say that we share the same destiny, way, way far in the future. But all of us being and living together, and including each other, not in God's love, but each other's love, having to share the same moment in time and getting along here and now, that is pretty challenging. Especially because we know ourselves. Which is why universalism, the idea that we all share the same destiny, can lead pretty quickly to giving up on the idea of heaven completely. Or it's the philosophy of humanism. If heaven's not just full of good people, translation, the people I like or agree with, who really wants to go there anyway? Or vice versa, if heaven is full of all the people I don't like and don't agree with, that sounds like hell. So is this heaven, or is this hell? Yes. It's a huge, complicated responsibility to co-create reality together. It matters what we believe, and at the same time, we're called to love each other and ourselves beyond our beliefs. When Susan came to me with stories about what was happening at school for David, I felt sad too, and then angry. As I sorted through my own memories of being told I was wrong or bad, and remembered how bad that felt, I encouraged her to talk openly with her son about his own values and beliefs. Remaining silent didn't seem like a healthy thing for Noah, his mom, or for the rest of us. It hadn't been for me. So I was thrilled to hear what Susan had to say to me next. After talking to you about it that afternoon, she wrote to me in an email, I decided that I should encourage David to engage in respectful conversations about his beliefs. His belief system is ever evolving, but it is consistently well thought out, she said. He has a solid moral compass, which I hope would stand up against almost any religious authority. He's infuriated by Walmart's culture of income inequality. He insists we boycott companies that don't practice decent employee compensation, which isn't always convenient. He frequently asks me to give his birthday money to people we see begging on the side of the road. He reluctantly decided to give up Nutella because do you know what Nutella is? Oh, good. Because the palm oil used in the recipe is destroying the natural habitat of gorillas and other endangered species. Sorry. He boldly pointed out during our sibling class at the hospital that parents are not only mother and father, but could be the two moms or two dads, much to the horror and confusion of the conservative older woman leading our birthing class. I wonder where David goes to church. In these ways and many others, he consistently demonstrates love because he feels that it's the right thing to do, not because he's scared of eternal damnation. The last time we talked about this, he believed in heaven, but not hell, because no one deserves punishment like that, he said. Wow, I thought, there is hope for the future. And I must admit, I felt a little guilty reading about David's commitment to the greater good as he sees it. I don't know if you did. I felt a lot humbled by his willingness and capacity to sacrifice for the good as he knows and feels it, because Nutella is really delicious. But once I got over my guilt, sort of, I found myself very moved by his conviction and his strengths. Many of us have lost that unconditional sense of our own inherent worth and dignity, our own goodness and the goodness of our convictions somewhere along the way. Someone yelled at us or hit us. Someone punished us, mocked us, demeaned us, abused us, maybe assaulted us, and that made us doubt and fear that we weren't good enough. It can happen at any age, sometimes very, very young. I remember reading about a grandfather and his 2-year-old grandson playing in a swimming pool. The boy was big for his age and a handful for his grandfather to manage, and he wiggled hard to get away out of his grandfather's arms, and his grandfather held him firm, afraid that he would get hurt or even drown, but the tighter his grip got, the more the boy struggled to be free. And then the boy tried to make a big splash, and the momentum carried his hand right up to his grandfather's face. Everyone in the pool heard the slap, and then the silence, and then the roar. In a flash of anger, the grandfather shouted at the boy and raised his arm. And the boy went limp and silent. He had never heard his grandfather's voice like that before. He had never been hurt by him in this way. Although the grandfather did not strike back, their perfect bond was broken, and the boy had lost his innocence, his sense that all was well with the world and that he was safe in it. When did you lose your innocence? It's important to remember, because once it's lost, there are consequences in our daily lives, and to find our way back to our own sense of goodness and belonging, we may have to retrace some of those steps. For some of us, once we realized that grown-ups, even our parents or our teachers, lie, we started to wonder, unconsciously or consciously, whether the rules really made that much of a difference at all. When did it become okay for you to fake it, to cheat, or to lie? When did you start to sneak a pen into your purse at the doctor's office? Or cheat on tests? Or forget to return the excess change the cashier gave you, or at least pretend to forget? Or fudge a few numbers on your taxes, or pad your resume with imagined accomplishments and achievements? The trouble is, the more we fool ourselves in these small ways, the better we get at justifying our own behavior and the fewer real choices we have. We feel moved to wake up and feed the baby when it cries, perhaps, but instead we wait to see if our spouse will respond first instead. When they don't, we begin to judge them and justify ourselves. Could be about the dishes or the laundry. When we betray ourselves, though, by not acting on our own generous and kind impulses, we blame others to cover up for our disappointment in ourselves. And in the process, we forget all about that first generous and kind impulse. We lose touch with the love we feel for others. We distance ourselves from them, and we lose touch with the love we have for ourselves. We distance ourselves from ourselves. And as our doubt about our own goodness and worthiness gets bigger and bigger, our trespasses may also grow more serious. Now we lie about not having enough money to pay back a friend. We drink and drive and lie about it. We cheat on a partner or spouse. We get very good at hiding who we are because it feels like there's just too much at stake now. We start living a divided life. We may steal or even kill. We master the art of saying, I'm sorry, but don't take responsibility, or learn how to change our thoughts or our behaviors. We justify our own actions by universalizing them as part of our culture today. We think or say things like this: pride moves people to endow scholarship funds and fund capital campaigns. And we say lust fuels the entertainment industry and benefits everyone. And we say lying is just a spin that enhances product sales. Greed is motivation for building our economy, and anger is motivation for social change. I'm not as bad as all that, we tell ourselves, as we are careful to cover our tracks. But underneath it all, we lie because we want something and we fear the truth won't get it for us. Underneath all that, we manipulate or cheat because we want something and we fear that goodness will not get it for us. We become so distracted and self-involved, we forgot what we lost and what we were looking for in the first place. To know we are good, again, or maybe for the first time. A Spirit Song member stopped me a few days ago to tell me about how he hadn't reached out to a fellow singer who he knew was struggling. I listened for a while, and then I asked him what he wanted to do about it. Call him, he said. Great, I answered. Guess I just needed to confess, he smiled as he said it and looked into my eyes. He's not much of a churchgoer, this man. I didn't blink as I responded, he'll be so happy to hear from you. It's so simple and still so difficult to admit our failings and to correct them, no matter how small they are. Of course, the bigger they are, the more difficult it gets. It will take more than a phone call and one conversation to clear or clean up some of our actions. But no one else is going to punish or harm us as harshly as we are punishing ourselves by staying silent. Speaking up about our shameful secrets is a first essential step. Start with the little ones and then build up to the bigger ones. It definitely gets easier with practice. Remember our reading? What's the difference between Judas and Peter? I asked. Maybe the biggest difference was that Judas didn't have any practice reaching out for help. He didn't have a spiritual practice of confession or repentance and renewal. So when he found himself in trouble, when he knew that he had betrayed his best friend and his teacher, he isolated himself. He went away. He found himself all alone, and his heart, his mind, his conscience, his ego could not withstand the weight of what he had done alone. we kill ourselves, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, when we abandon or sacrifice our own sense of our own goodness. And we need each other, especially when we are lost and need to be found, although we tend to do the opposite, to hide our shame. As human beings, there are many things we can create for ourselves: entertainment, stories, pain, toothpaste, maybe even positive self-talk, writes Nadia Bolz-Weber, but it is difficult to create this thing that frees us from the bondage of the self. We cannot create for ourselves God's words of grace. We must tell them to each other. It's embarrassing and messy, but it seems to be the only way back into the land of the living. On the other hand, Peter had made 3 huge mistakes, but he didn't run away. He stayed to face the other apostles and the crowds. He was exposed in the public square time and time again by a servant girl, and although he denied the truth, he bore the sting of their gaze and their accusations. And somehow, by passing through and surviving that fire, he was able to choose life and his own goodness over death. I mentioned murder earlier, or killing, and some of you may have thought, well, that's a little extreme. At least I know I would never commit murder. You're supposed to laugh when I say that. I don't know if there are any murderers in the house. There might be. And you should know, if you don't already, that a man convicted of murder was one of the original group of people who founded All Souls, this very community. His name was Albert Patrick, and he was born in 1866. He was convicted for the murder of his client, William Rice, the president of Rice University. Mr. Patrick was a lawyer, charged in 1900 and sentenced to death by electrocution at Sing Sing in 1902. The governor of New York then commuted his sentence to life imprisonment, and he was finally pardoned in 1912 when he was disbarred. Richard Lloyd Jones, who covered this story for the Tribune, was the organizer and the host for the very first meeting to discuss the establishment of our congregation. When Mr. Patrick walked up his walkway for the meeting, Jones had to decide whether to let him in or not. He had to decide in that moment what he really believed about God, and even more so about humanity. Whatever Mr. Patrick had done or not done, he had to decide if he deserved to be excluded from that meeting that would become this community. He must have wrestled with that image of a heaven crowded with liars and thieves and murderers, wondering what to do. And then Mr. Jones did invite Mr. Patrick into his home. It wasn't long before Mr. Patrick became the first treasurer of the church, and a while later, one of the 27 who signed the charter to create All Souls. On many days, I think we exist just for this, to help each other rediscover and re-experience our own goodness. Of course, if we want to do more than feel guilty and sorry, we need to also change our actions. We need to do some things differently. A wonderful psychiatrist I know says therapy is secular confession. 12-step groups are a hybrid, part secular, part sacred. The principle remains the same. We need to tell someone what we've done. And then we need to do something about it to make it right again. Susan, David's mom, wrote recently to say the Bible-thumping bully still harasses David occasionally, but I think he's getting better at dealing with it. He's comfortable with the fact that people might not agree with him, but know it's okay to talk respectfully about his own beliefs. He's decided for now that he believes in many gods and just hasn't decided which one is the best to invest his stock in yet. So I ask you, how are you investing in your best self these days? Do you need a practice of secular confession to get you back on track and back in touch with your own goodness? If so, find someone to talk to. Maybe it's time to join a soulful circle or participate in a mosaic or rewire group where you can bring your own stories and experiences of race and racism into the light. Maybe you'll decide to try the spiritual practice of confession with one of our ministers here during the week leading up to Easter, the traditional time to confess, even if that sounds awfully religious. But what a relief it might be too. It's in the DNA of this place, the knowing that we all need and deserve, at the very least, a second chance, if not many more. To be fully restored to his full humanity, Mr. Patrick needed and was granted the welcoming embrace of our community. Know that if you do try on confession here, more than God's forgiveness can be expected. It would be an opportunity to reflect and discern what actions you want to take to restore right relationships in your own life. If you're concerned about your own selfishness, perhaps you will decide to rake a friend's lawn and garden as spring arrives. If you're feeling guilty for getting angry too often, you might decide to write a few sincere letters of apology and start working with a new therapist. If you're concerned about how you overspend, perhaps you will give away a few of your prized possessions to someone who would be thrilled and so thankful to receive them. If you feel your life has no meaning or greater purpose, perhaps you'll consider trying a few life coaching sessions. If a murderer was a founder of this church, and he was, then this community can hold you too and help you find your own way back to your own goodness. We are what we need, because we get back there, back to knowing we are good by letting ourselves be loved and learning to love again. So in closing, remember the cartoon I described at the beginning as you look around at each other for a minute. Here we are, sinners all, in our home for all souls, not all saints, thinking, look around. Now wait a minute, you're here too? And you? It's time to take it in, because this is it. It's us. We better believe it. It's you and you and you, and this is heaven, despite our flaws and failings, because this is where we're learning to love all kinds of people, including ourselves, no matter what we've done or haven't done. As David said so wisely, no one deserves to be excluded from this circle of community of life and love. No one deserves punishment like that. Shalom, be well, and peace be with you this week.
We are your church, and we are proud to be your church, or at least a church that's having a positive impact on your life. I am personally blessed to be your minister, or at least a minister who you're allowing to speak into your life. I hope you'll support our ministry and share your love beyond belief by texting LOVEBB to 41444, or go to our website. But you can just text LOVEBB to 41444 and make your gift. It's wonderful. Thank you. Be blessed and be a blessing.